Good morning. I hope you had an awesome Easter. It was absolutely spectacular. We celebrate the resurrection of Jesus literally every day, but there is still something very special about Easter that I particularly love. And so I hope it was a great time of reflection for you, a great time of celebration for you. If you've ever thought that sometimes these preachers or these pastors go really, really long, you might be correct, but I also want to assure you that a lot of times there is a ton of information that is cut. It is one of the hardest parts about preparing is the cutting of great information that you would love to include in some format, and yet, apart from being there for 2 hours, it's hard to put all of that in there. So I thought this morning I would give you a director's cut or maybe some bonus material on yesterday's message on Mary Magdalene. We were looking at the book of John, chapter 20. And as we were looking at Mary Magdalene, what an incredible story. I have to admit, for me, I've kind of slept on Mary Magdalene a little bit, partially just because I think her story is actually scattered, of course, sort of throughout the four Gospels. It's not all in one place. As we mentioned yesterday, she's mentioned more than even Mary, the mother of Jesus. She's the most frequently mentioned woman. She's mentioned more than many of the disciples, and yet not always aware of everything that she's doing. So I've got a couple pieces this morning that I'd love to just share with you so that you can enjoy some of the stuff that I had to cut because it would have gone too long, but I think it's really awesome material. So first, I want to just walk us through where we see Mary in the different Gospels. So if you're interested, you can kind of trace this down yourself. So we see the part about her being free from the 7 demons in the book of Luke. We see that after that, she followed Jesus around, and that shows up in both Mark and the book of Luke. Being one of the supporters of Jesus financially shows up in Luke. The fact that she was at the crucifixion when Jesus died, we find that in the book of Matthew. We see that in the book of Mark is where she anoints the body of Jesus along with others. But in Matthew is where we see that she was there when the stone was rolled in front of the door of the tomb. So we'll go back to Matthew for that. We see that in John, where we saw yesterday, she was the first to see Jesus. And in Luke, she was the first to testify of the resurrection. She goes back to the disciples and is testifying of the resurrection. So as you can see, all over the Gospels, all 4 Gospels have different pieces. And I think maybe that's partially why I hadn't seen fully the influence of what Mary had done until preparing for this message. So if you want to chase that down, you can use any good Bible tools. You can even kind of Google that, put it into some Bible software. Bible Gateway has an option there. But I think it's really fascinating just to read her whole story through the Gospels. Another piece that I really thought was interesting, but did not want to bring up yesterday just due to time, was, if you remember the story in John, it says that the grave clothes were empty, like Jesus had vacated those. And then it says the napkin was folded in a different place. There is at least one individual that I'd referenced in research that said this was a Jewish custom. So if you were at this day and age, you were invited over to dinner. If you went over to someone's house and they had great hospitality and they welcomed you and the food was perfectly cooked and you just had a great time, as a symbol of that, you would take your napkin and kind of crumple that up and put that on the table or on the platter. If you went to someone's house and it was awful, the food was terrible, they weren't hospitable, they didn't care about you being there at all, what you would do is actually you'd neatly fold that napkin and put that on the platter as a way of saying, I didn't enjoy it and I have no intention of returning. Now we just ghost somebody via texting. But anyway, you put the napkin on the platter. So this scholar was actually suggesting that in some ways, yes, it was showing that the body was gone. Yes, in some ways it's proof that the body was not stolen because a robber wouldn't take the time to unwrap the body and also fold the tablecloth. It wasn't this idea of this, swooning and coming back to life because you wouldn't be able to unwrap yourself. So there is a piece of testifying to the resurrection itself in this. However, I think it's an interesting overlay to the Jewish custom of eating in that sense that the napkin's folded. Jesus has no intention of ever returning to this place of death. And I think that's just a beautiful picture of what is going on in this scene. So, like there again, this is not widespread, but it is helpful to see and understand the Jewish customs of the day. And it seems like this is one that has particular relevance to this scene in the tomb. Another piece that I'd love to bring up is the angel sitting. Now, God puts a lot of details in the scripture, and it's not on accident. It's not a mistake. Now, sometimes we don't always know why, or we have ideas why, but this caught my attention as I was reading this, and I was like, is there any other place that angels sit in scripture? And I couldn't find any other places that angels are sitting, which means that's an interesting note. Mary is the one who goes into the tomb, sees the two angels sitting. Two ideas that come of this. One, and they might both have some validity to it. One is that when do you sit down? Well, you sit down when the work is complete. It's a state of resting. It's a state of relaxation. When there's no more work to do or the work has been done, that's when you sit. And I think there's something to be said for this. Is when Mary comes in, the work is done. Salvation has been earned. Satan has been defeated. Death has been defeated. The angels are there just to testify and to explain to Mary, or to ask her, in this case, why she's crying. They're not there to do the work. The work has been completed. And so I think that is a beautiful picture, and I think it's an accurate picture. One other element that might be interesting is that one pastor I was listening to actually said there's a really interesting overlay between the tomb, which would have had a slab with the angel sitting on both sides, where Jesus' body was laid, and the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament. The mercy seat was where the blood would be applied to cover the sins of the people of Israel, and there was an angel carved into the mercy seat on either side of it, covering this mercy seat. And what a beautiful picture this is of this tomb, this slab where Jesus was laid, is the mercy seat. So in the death and the resurrection of Jesus, that combination, we have received mercy if we're in Jesus. And I thought, what an incredible picture. Now, is it both of these pictures? Is it one of these pictures? I think there's pieces of both of those that God is trying to communicate with this. But I thought, what an incredible piece that I had not seen. And so I'm grateful for those commentators and scholars and pastors that help us see these different pieces. It didn't fit into the message yesterday, but I thought that was just really an incredible, beautiful picture, both of the resting of the angels, because Jesus has done it all, and of the mercy seat, the ultimate mercy seat. The blood isn't applied regularly, but once and for all, because of the work of Jesus and what he's done, that we can find mercy through his sacrifice, through his death, and through his resurrection. So that's an interesting detail on the angels sitting. And then I'll just give you one other final piece this morning, is that I told you I was talking to one of my daughters and about the proof of the resurrection. And we talked about several things. A couple of them we mentioned yesterday. A lot of them we didn't. But one of the things that I had a good time with her is I said, there's this one character that to me is just such an interesting proof of the resurrection. And that is James, the half-brother of Jesus. And I asked my daughter, I said, hey, how much would it take for your sister to convince you that she is God? And she was like, that's impossible. And I was like, okay. I'm like, how hard would it be for you to convince her that you are God? And she's like, that's not going to happen. And I say that because I think that I've got 4 siblings, I'm one of 5. There's nothing I can do to convince my siblings that I am even half deity, much less fully God and fully man. And to me, that one of the siblings of Jesus, the half siblings, is willing to lay down his life at the risk of martyrdom to actually state and to believe and proclaim that his sibling is God in flesh. What would someone have to do to accomplish that? Well, I think the resurrection is just that type of thing. So anyway, hope you enjoyed a little bit of this bonus material. Hope you have the resources now to go if you want to investigate Mary Magdalene further. Maybe the best and the first witness of the resurrection of Jesus. It was such a pleasure sharing that with you yesterday. And I hope you continue to live today in the power of the resurrection.